Hi guys, welcome back to the Journey Coaching channel. I'm Abigail, and today I have a special guest. So her name is Terry Carlson, and she actually wrote the Journey Coaching materials for us. She is a licensed therapist and was a nurse. How do you want me to introduce you?
No, that's good. I still am a nurse. I keep my license, my nursing license. But then I went back to school and got my master's in counseling. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
Yeah. And she wrote the workbook with a pastor named Mike Kalachi, and they just really have a heart for people and for building relationships. And so we just want to showcase a story that you'd like to share with us and what's on your heart for Journey. So what was your first experience with God? Because I know that your faith has been a huge part of your life, and it's made you who you are today.
I grew up in a home where relationship with God was not just discussed and taught. It was, but it wasn't just that. My parents lived a life that modeled a relationship with Christ, a relationship with God in general. I guess looking back on it, one of my favorite memories is when I remember Sundays were different. You'd wake up in the morning my dad was always the first one up on Sunday mornings, and he would start his pot of coffee because he drank a lot of coffee. And you'd smell the coffee brewing, and we had this old, it was a record player, but it was like a console kind of a thing. It was a big piece of furniture. And he would put a stack of, it was always Christian gospel music. The greats that were at that time, he loved the different ones, and they were really, really cool music. And he would play those in the morning, and that's how we would wake up, is to the smell of coffee and the sound of these wonderful musicians. And that set the scene for us to get ready to go to church. And we'd go to church, and then after church, my grandparents lived in the same town where our church was. And so we would often go and have lunch afterwards at the Country Cafe, it was called. But it was just, Sundays were different, and they were special, and we tried not to do much. It wasn't a legalistic kind of a thing. It was more along the lines of, my folks would maybe take a nap in the afternoon, and we would just hang out, So to me, Sundays were special, and it added to my belief in God. It added to how I saw the relationship. And my parents modeled their faith through being kind to others, being generous, the way they helped other people that needed help and stuff like that.
What were some lessons that they taught you that are very prominent today in your life?
Okay, so some of the values that I took away from that experience. One was, you treat other people kindly.
Yeah.
That was my dad rarely. I rarely remember my dad getting angry, but he would get angry if we mistreated somebody. That was you just don't do that. And it didn't matter who it was, whether you knew him or not. You treated people kindly. The other one was, if something was worth doing, it was worth doing well.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And that's something that stuck with me. It's like, okay, if it's worth doing to the best we can. Things weren't held to a really high standard, like we had to do things perfectly. That wasn't even an option. It was, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And carrying your own weight to some degree too. You helped other people, but you also needed to make sure that you didn't depend on others when it was something you could do for yourself. You had to carry your own weight. Yeah. There's a verse in the Bible that talks about people sharing each other's burdens, but carrying our own load.
Yeah.
And
if you don't work, you don't eat. That's in Timothy or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And carrying each other's burdens, a burden is something that is almost too heavy for them to carry. So you help with that. But carrying your own weight, it'd be kind of like carrying your own backpack. I mean, it's carrying the things, so doing things. So those are some values that I took away from my family.
I see that relationships were very important for you, specifically friendships. And so I see that on some of your points you talk about like middle school and starting high school, that there were so prominent relationships in your life with youth leaders, with your best friend.
Yeah, well, friendships I think have always been really, really important to me. I remember childhood friends. I can remember kindergarten friends. And having a good friend was always really important to me. I think I made friends easily. I always wanted to be a friend. In fact, when I was in kindergarten, I was 5 years old, that summer before kindergarten, my family moved from one part of town to the other. And I don't remember this, but this is the story that they tell. I didn't have any friends in this new neighborhood. And so I would go around and I knocked on doors at 5 years old.
You're so different.
And I knocked on the door and I said, "Hi, is there anybody in here I can play with?"
That's so cute.
Anyway, it's a little scary today, but
Yeah.
but that was it. But no, having friends, I remember some of the childhood friends I had. I think one of the things that really set in my mind was when I was going between 9th and 10th grade year. One of my best friends, she was actually our next door neighbor, and we'd been friends for a little while, and did everything together during that time. And then during that summer between 9th and 10th grade, she ran away from home. And that I didn't realize until later on looking back, but that really was part of the catalyst that set me into kind of a depression. It was like, what do I do? I felt lost. I felt confused. My dad and I would drive around looking for her. I knew the places that we used to go and hang out, ride our bikes to and stuff. And
was it just like out of the blue?
Well,
like you had no idea that was happening?
It was out of the blue for everybody else but me. We had talked before she left. It sounded just like, kind of like, she had said something about running away and we should run away together. And I said, no, that wouldn't work. And so there had been some conversations that I didn't take seriously.
Yeah.
And so when I found out from her parents that she'd run away, they called us and I think they were looking to see if she was with us. And it was, when I found out that she had run away, it was it was surprising and out of the blue to everybody else.
Yeah.
And to me, it was hard because it was like, well, maybe I could have stopped her.
Oh.
And then it just that whole time period, it's a summer between school years and to not really have a best friend or have a friend because she was gone. In fact, she did show up a few months later. She had called.
She was gone for months.
Yeah. She had called. She had gotten to, I think she was in New York, and she had gone through a lot of really tough things and decided to come back home.
Yeah.
And so she was hitchhiking back. She called from New York and saying she was heading back and we were going to try to, can we get you a bus? Can we, and she said, no, she's going to take care of this.
15.
Yeah. Well,
she's young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't driving yet. So, neither one of us had gotten to be 16 yet. So, she said, no, I'm going to hitchhike back. And, I remember having a conversation with my folks after the phone call and, it's like, no, she says, I'm going to keep hitchhiking back. So I said, well, call me every day. Let me know where you're at. And so I think she did maybe once. I'm not remember sure. But then we got a call from the police in one of the towns in Illinois. She'd gotten back from New York that far. And they'd seen her on the side of the road hitchhiking and picked her up. And so her parents were out of town. And so my mom and dad drove to pick her up. I think it was several hours to go get her. And she had been in a youth jail kind of thing. They didn't call it that, but and she was barefoot and she, because she'd had a chance to get a ride and she had taken off her shoes on the side of the road and she just jumped in the car and forgot her shoes. So here she is in this youth jail without any shoes on. She had some other inconveniences there. And then she had eaten. And so we went to take her to a restaurant. Well, the restaurants all said no shoes, no shirt, no service. Mm-hmm. And so she had, of course, this was in the 70s, I want you to know. And we had bell-bottom pants. That was really common at the time. So she just would tuck her feet underneath her pants so that nobody could tell she was barefoot. It's funny how things like that you remember. But it was a really, I think it was good to see her, but things had changed. Mm-hmm. The relationship, the things that she'd gone through, she didn't want to share with me. And it was just, that relationship had changed. What was really helpful to me was that about the same time, so it was right as we were getting ready to start school, our church had hired a youth leader. And she came, I don't even think they were looking for one. I think she just came to the church and said, hey, this is what I've been trained in. Would you, I'm not sure how it came about because I never heard anything about them looking for one. But anyway, she came to just work at our church. And she became a mentor for me I didn't even know I needed. And she gathered people together in a way where we didn't really have a youth group that was, of any consequence. And she gathered other students together. And so we developed these friendships and these relationships with our youth group and with her as our mentor. And I could kind of picture Jesus sitting around on the ground with his disciples, because there were several of us sitting around on the grass talking about, who Jesus was and what what kind of life he lived and stuff. And so that mentorship, things that she taught me during that time really ended up being a good catalyst for my spiritual growth. She lit a fire under my spiritual growth, which had really been smoldering at that point. And so it was, I believe she was there because God sent her there, not just for me, but for the others that we were with. But that's one of the reasons, again, relationships, it just showed me how relationships are so important, and having a significant friendship. She was a mentor to me. We didn't call it that. In a lot of ways she did, we used the word coaching for Journey, because a lot of times mentors aren't necessarily, I don't think she was more than a few years older than me. I think she was fairly fresh out of college, and I was junior, senior in high school by that time. And I think it was more, she did more what we talk about, what we call coaching, than actually, any kind of a formal mentor.
So what is the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Well, I think it's a formality. I think with mentors, you've had a mentor before, I think. And a lot of times there's more formality to it. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about this, or we're going to work on this. With coaching, it's more looking at what skills a person has. It's answering questions. I could take her any questions I had about God or Jesus, or we would talk about relationship issues at school, or we would talk about she did it was more of an informal sit down and just chat about what's going on.
Yeah.
And bringing that into perspective.
And she wasn't necessarily an expert on it, but she was just a little bit ahead of you in that.
Yeah, she just graduated from college, I believe, at that time. I don't think she'd had another job before that.
Yeah. So going back to the relationship that you had with your best friend, were you guys friends for very much longer after that?
No, because she ended up running away several times. She would come home for a little while and go. We would connect every once in a while, but the friendship wasn't the same.
That must have been hard.
It was. I think it was helpful that I'd gotten involved with our church group a little bit more at that time, to replace kind of that friendship that we had. But yeah, it was something that was kind of tough.
Let's say that you didn't have those relationships with your youth mentor and whatnot, and all the other connections at church. Where do you think you would have been?
Oh, that's an interesting question. We never can know. When we take a road, when our life goes down a different road, we never have any idea what would have happened if we'd have stayed on this road. I can only think that it wouldn't have been. I wouldn't be who I am today, but I don't know who that would have been. It wouldn't have been. Maybe God would have eventually found put somebody else in my path that would have helped. But the friends that we have a big impact on our values moving forward.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think, so the advice I give to people, to younger people, is pick your friends carefully, because there always was a chance that I could have run off with my friend. I wasn't there. I had a really, really close relationship with my parents, especially with my dad. And when that possibility came up, when she said that, my first thought was it would devastate my dad. There's no way I would do something like that. Unfortunately, she didn't she must not have had the same kind of relationship with her parents.
Yeah.
So, I mean, relationship is so big of a factor. It's one of the reasons, going, as a counselor, it's one of the things I really encourage people, because research shows that people who have less, fewer and less deep relationships have more depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts,
They don't live longer.
No,
Science, yeah.
And so relationships are huge. I think in some cases there would be a lot less people coming to counselors if they had close relationships that were healthy, as opposed to, we see more, I'll see people coming in that are struggling with some of these other things and with some really deep, sense of depression and thoughts and stuff. And it's usually because they've broken, relationships have been broken, or they've not been in healthy relationships. Or, I think it's really important to pick your relationships well, because that's where our values and that's where our pathway goes a lot of times.
Yeah, I think that's such wise advice, and I'm reminded of that in my own life, where we shared a part of my testimony on Tuesday, where there was a portion of my life where I had no friends, and now I have a bunch of mentors in my life and quite a bit of friends, and the night and day difference of who I am is just insane. Like, no one can argue against that fact that people need people, and we need to be in relationships, and we do need people to share the burdens of life with, and you don't just get that on a whim. Like, you have to work for it and you have to pursue that.
Right, and I think all friendships require work. I like the way you use that work, whether, even in a marriage. Jeff and your grandpa and I have been married for, our next anniversary will be 47 years. It's work.
Dang, you're old.
Hey, we got married. How old are you? No. We got married when we were 19.
Okay.
But the other part still stands. I'm constantly reminded how old I am. But
well, you're young. Well, because you got married young. We have a huge family. We have. That's something that I'm so blessed by. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, sometimes this big family, there's so many people, and I'm just like, the drama.
Yeah.
But then families can carry such burdens. Like, if I'm thinking about like things that had happened in our lives and the fact that we are still so like close knit, like families can be so strong. It just takes a lot of work. And I even think back with my relationship with my best friend. That was a lot of work, because we got into arguments all the time, and they were really fun. Sometimes they were not so fun. And I'd say the closest relationship I have is with her. And I didn't expect something to take so much work but be so fruitful.
Yeah.
And so I also think that that's something that's like maybe a narrative out in the world of, oh, if it's not easy, it's not right.
Well, and I think the idea, we have a negative connotation of work. Oh, it's, we shouldn't have to work so hard. I've heard couples come in and say that, oh, this is hard work. We shouldn't have. Who told you it's not hard? It's not supposed to be hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do anything, gardening is work. If you don't pull weeds, what happens? You don't have it doesn't make as much fruit. I've gardened a lot, especially since the pandemic. But I think the thing that, it's like one of the things I did this year was I was really working on some grapevines. I wanted to see if and they say you have to prune them back in order to get good grapes and stuff. And I always hate to prune because I always feel like I'm cutting off part of their limb, But I did. I have, and the amount of grapes that we ended up this year just from cutting back, the weaker branches, cutting off, not letting them grow too long, too fast, that sort of thing. And I have had more grapes than we could ever eat.
I just want to say that to the audience, that story she shared with me a couple of months ago was such a blessing to me, because personally, and I just want to say this is just so important, personally, I was going through something that was difficult, and I'm like, why does this feel so uncomfortable? And that's a whole story for another time. And I remember we were at like a party and you were talking with one of like my cousins, an older cousin, and you guys were talking about gardening and you were sharing those stories of like you've had to prune off so much and you were scared that this plant was gonna die, but then it grew so much. And I think that there's so much that we can just learn from other people just by being in proximity with them. Like you didn't even know that that was like healing for my heart.
That's cool.
In that
No,
moment.
I did not. I'm glad you told me.
Yeah, so yeah, that just makes me really happy.
Oh, that's cool. I think it's a lesson for life. And I think that's why I wanted to try it. I wanted to see if I could really make that happen. Because I think a lot of times what happens is we get so wrapped up in so many different things. And it's kind of like the grapevine would send out, 10 or 12 little tiny shoots. And it's when I tried it before, it was like I just leave it grow, but then you get these little tiny grapes.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be mature right because it was using all of its energy to grow vine, not grapes. Mm-hmm. And so by cutting it back and being really, really ruthless in a way, the new vines or the new branches that do come out after that are the ones where the grapes grow on. Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting when you look at it from life, it's like, how many times are we so involved in so many different things? They're all great things, but we're so involved in all the different things that we're not putting all of our energy into any one of them. Mm-hmm. Or they're getting in the way, and we can't. If we say yes to too many things, we can't do everything. Mm-hmm. And so, learning how to say no to certain things—that's the pruning. It's saying, you know what, this is a really great thing, but I can't do that right now. It's not. I need to focus on these other things that it's great, but it would be a distraction from what I really need to focus on. Mm-hmm. And even the pruning the longer, the bigger branches, and not letting them grow too long, because they'll grow halfway through the garden.
Oh yeah.
It's like even with the stuff with Journey and with the ministry, because we're trying to coordinate this ministry, and it's like, okay, but we don't want to grow too fast. We want to keep it. Yeah, we've got to keep it more of a controlled growth, so that we have the energy and the stamina and the ability, the time and energy to do that.
Yeah. That's a great transition point to now coming from Journey. So you've talked about how relationships for you are different. They're fuller, they're deeper. We have a huge family, mm-hmm. a very large family.
As an adult, and you'll see kind of as you grow too and get more involved in stuff, as an adult, you get so involved in so many different things, work. We've had three kids and 3 in-laws. So, so they're married and wonderful. I love our son-in-laws and our daughter-in-law as much as.
How many grandkids do you have?
Well, that's where I was going. Okay, so 12. And the 12 range in age from 3 to 26, I think she's going to be soon. So we've got grandkids in other parts of the country now. And, so it's, and trying to be in their lives in a positive way when they're all in such a, there's so many different directions that everybody's going.
Especially when this one takes up so much energy. Anyways, moving on.
I just say you said that, not me. But anyway, the thing is that it sometimes doesn't leave a lot of time for self-care. It doesn't leave a lot of time for friendships, mm-hmm. that like the type you have when you're going through school and stuff. It's still important. You still have to kind of maintain those friendships, and you find friendships in other ways. I mean, we have, you build friendships with your work peers. You build mm-hmm. friendships with people at church. You build friendships with people that you do other kinds of ministry and stuff with. But it's a little bit different, and you have to be more intentional to try to maintain those. They do take time, just like we said with any other kind of friendship, any other kind of relationship. But I think it's also important for us to see our relationship with ourself as important. Mm-hmm. And that's something I've kind of learned in this later part of my life, and how, it's easy when you're younger and you've got endless amounts of energy, but as you get older and you have, there's different things that zap your energy for a lot of different reasons. And it's like, okay, I need to focus on me too. I need to take some time. I work in a very, as a counselor, I work in a very extroverted job. Mm-hmm. And even for an extrovert, that can be difficult. And I need that downtime. I need the me time for a little while to kind of, sift through it. It's the time Alone time is when you have the ability to process stuff that's been going on in the other times when you're more social. You can't really focus on those things until later. And so that's the time that I call it my processing time. I call it that's when I do a brain dump. It's like, okay, do I need to think about this? No, I don't. Okay. And so you kind of process through different things. If you don't give yourself, and that was one of the things that my youth leader back in high school taught us too, was you have to have time for yourself. Otherwise, you get a whole bunch of stuff just rolling around in your own head, and it doesn't have perspective. And so you have to have some time to just kind of sift through it all.
Yeah, yeah. And you do lots of things, from counseling to, running a car dealership, and then this journey stuff.
Well, I don't do too much of the running the car dealership, but...
Well, you did.
I did. And I do...
and also you're keeping a leash on Grandpa.
Yeah, that's kind of hard. I'll pass that over to you if you want. No. And like we said, relationships like marriage take time. They're hard. I think people don't realize how much benefit we get out of hard work. It's like tending the grapes.
Yeah.
There's a joy in being able to eat the food that you've grown.
Yeah, you've prepared and whatnot.
Tomatoes this year. I had so many cherry tomatoes that we had a bowl full when just from one harvest.
Yeah.
It's things like that. There's a reward that goes along with hard work, but if you don't do the work, you don't see the reward a lot of times.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the verses that keeps showing up in my life. Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off the sin that so easily hinders us, and then run with perseverance, keeping our eyes on Jesus. And then it later tells you that discipline feels painful now, but it will produce like the fruit of righteousness and peace in the future.
I think those are wonderful verses. I think the one that has kind of pushed me through kind of disliking work, if you want to put it that way, is the Genesis story. Because if you look at it from the Genesis story, work was not given to us because of the fall. It's not a punishment. We were given, Adam and Eve were given work to do in the garden before the fall. So God has given us work as a blessing, and we see it as a curse a lot of times.
Tell me more about journey. So we've talked about kind of your relationships in the past, how negative situations with relationships affected you, and then also the positives from your youth group and whatnot. And so, and you're a counselor now, so you've been very impacted by relationships. What got your heart going for starting Journey?
I think it was social media.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. There are so many with the rise of social media, especially, people have gotten so segmented. People have gotten so isolated, and you see things now. And I don't know if I can directly inquire, whether it's, again, you can't get into causation. I think there's a correlation between the rise of our phones that have become more than phones and social media, and isolating people in such a way where you feel like you have a lot of friends, but you're isolated. And you're not face to face. And there's, you can find a million self-help books out there. You can find there's all this independent stuff that is isolating us. And I think the correlation, it correlates in some way with the fact that anxiety and depression is at a record high. Suicide is at a high rate. We're not connecting in a way that we used to. When I remember kids, peers and stuff, if you said something, if you're hanging out with a friend and you do something or said something that hurts them, they tell you get immediate feedback. You
have the facial expressions.
Yeah.
You have like the droopy, saggy shoulders and all of that.
You get the body language. Yeah. You don't get body language cues from social media usually.
Yeah.
You put something out there and a million people see it, and the problem is you can get trolls, and you're going to get all this stuff, and they're not people to trust and respect, like your friends that used to live next door, that sort of thing. And so one of the things that, so Mike Kalachi and Jeff, my husband, your grandpa, and I sat down one day and we were talking about this. And one of the things that Mike said was he was working as a pastor in a really, really big church in Chicago area. And one of the things he said that really stuck with me as we were talking is he said, even in the churches have changed. They used to be small social gatherings in small towns where a pastor was a shepherd, and he married people and buried people and all the stuff in between. And he shepherded flocks of people who were in these churches, and they had this relationship in a way. And he says what's happened now is in so many cases, pastors are now middle managers managing programs, not shepherding flocks. And that was kind of that was on his heart at that time. And so we're talking about all of these things, and it's like, okay, the question that I threw out as we're sitting around the table was, if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. How do we become part of the solution?
Yes. I love it.
And that's where Journey was born.
Hands dirty.
It's like, how do we get people together? How do we help people build relationships face to face? It's not a self-help book. It's a dual help book. It's getting together with one other person or two couples together. And a lot of times when you're not used to being face to face with people, especially kids or young people, to me, anybody under 40 is a kid. When you're not used to getting together and face to face, it's awkward. It's uncomfortable.
So awkward.
And how do I get to know this person? And sometimes one of the things I've noticed about even some of the younger people know is they don't make eye contact with you when you're talking. And I think that's because they're not used to making eye contact. And it's like, okay, so how do we fix this? How do we get people back into relationship and bring down the depression rate and the anxiety rate and all of that other stuff?
You throw them in the water.
Yeah.
Get them together, no matter how awkward it is. And I'm saying this from personal experience. I had social anxiety. I couldn't talk to people. I was literally shaking. And one of the things that I did was I just did it. And I embarrassed myself so many times.
You do. It's embarrassing.
I'm so awkward. It's not even funny.
But that's the thing. I think kids get through the awkward stage younger in my day. Because you're doing it, you're getting awkward when you're 5 and 10 and 12, as opposed to, high school age or older. Because you're learning how to build those relationships younger, or you were. That's what I wanted to kind of bring back and fix. And so then it's one of the things I noticed. I was working on staff at our church for a while, and I noticed that when I tried to help get people involved in ministry, their response was often, I don't know how to do it. What if I do it wrong? I've never done this before. I don't, and so I found that if I gave them a tool, which was often just an outline, or it was a job description, or it was something in writing that said, here's what.
It was some sort of framework.
Yeah. Here's the framework. It's a little folder. It's a little whatever. Here's a framework. Here's how we're going to do this. You're not going to do it alone. We'll have somebody go with you the first time that you do this. That sort of thing. You'll work with somebody else who's done this. I found that I got a lot more responses and a lot more people volunteering when they had a framework to work with. So Journey, the original workbook came out. Think of it as a framework.
Grab the workbook?
Yeah. So this first workbook came about as a way to try to help be the framework for people sitting down together.
Yeah.
Getting to know each other is the first thing. It's like, okay, one person tells the other person, and if there's a coach, if somebody is doing this because they've done this, they've gone through this before, then they kind of take the role of the coach, and they'll say, hey, here's my story, here's why. And it's kind of like the testimony, but it's not a formal thing. It's more of a, here's why I want to do what I'm doing.
Oh, yeah. The first session is definitely my favorite one, because I didn't realize this until I was really sitting down and looking at the framework for what is Journey, what are we doing here, where do we want to go? And for some reason, a light bulb moment happened where I was like, this is all about stories. And I'm remembering back to when I was getting in relationships with mentors and whatnot. The first mentor that I had, her name's Jessie. We actually just recorded with her. I literally walked up to her. I didn't know her, never met her. People just were like, oh, you should meet this woman. For some reason, I walked up to her, we're talking, and I spill out my entire story, my entire testimony. And I say, would you be my mentor? And the impact that just sharing my story and having someone listen to me was so beneficial. And it gave me time and the ability to process outside of my own head. And some people can do this in so many different ways. Like, this is just a framework. We want people to get out and share your stories and listen and learn and just be impacted by looking from where you've been, what you're doing, and where you're going. Even if you don't use the journey workbook, this framework, this principle is so important. Like, if you draw your story, if you paint it, if you write it down, if you make a video about it, you make a movie, I don't know, whatever way that you want.
I had one lady that I went through this with, and she made hers as a poem.
Like, yeah, like, that's just how you think, like that. Like, be intimate with your story, because I think so many times, like, one of the things I did was I didn't think about, like, a lot of the past. Like, I just tend to forget it and just move forward. You just keep going forward. Well, if you never think about where you've been, what you've learned, and where you're going, like, you don't know what you're aiming for. So I really love, especially session 1 of our workbook. So I appreciate the way that you made that. Just like the first thing.
Well, one of the things too, I wanted people, and you felt comfortable sharing your story with Jessie. And I think that's one of the things we really encourage people to do, is find somebody you're comfortable sharing your story with. Because we have dark spots in all of our stories.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to be able to feel comfortable that if I share this dark spot with them, they're not going to push me away. They're not going to look down on me. They're going to understand, because they've got their own dark parts of their story.
Yeah.
And we give an example in one of the book, in page 10 of the book, and where you can even use like sticky notes on a wall, it's like, my journey. I was born, I had a happy childhood, but I had a lot of accidents. I played in a band, and it's kind of like, here's the story, I fell in love, but she didn't.
Oh, I saw that.
but people have that in their story, and it's like,
it impacts us.
Yeah.
This is like, this was a light bulb moment. Actually, I just want to share it. Just as like a practical example. I was struggling with something at work, and then also like in one of my relationships. And there was this like uncomfortable feeling that I had when I came up to like some resistance. And it was bothering me so much, to the point where I was like, I need to stop and take a break and figure this out. So I sat down on the table outside of our building, and I just started writing like things that have happened in my childhood, ways that I reacted to things in my childhood. And a story was brought up to me when I was like 7 years old. I'm really good at art. That's one of the talents God gave me. And I love to draw. I love to do anything artistic. And there was this one time in like, I think 2nd grade, where we had this art project where you had to draw the first letter of your name, so A, and you had 3 pastel colors, red, orange, and yellow. All you had to do was color in this A. Pretty basic. Anyone can do it. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. I tried it. I messed up, and I only had 1 paper. I couldn't get a second paper. I literally started crying.
Aww.
And I was like, Mom, I'm not doing this. I'm done. I was so pissed off.
Yeah.
She's like, no, you're actually going to do this. Like, you need to finish this, and you're going to turn it in. And because I probably like drew outside of the lines a little bit, I was just so frustrated. And so I ended up just like scribbling it, turning it in, like whatever. And that wasn't the only story that I had written down, but it was multiple things, and during multiple times where I had just given up because something was uncomfortable or something was hard. And it's like, oh, I have 50 examples of this in my past, and I'm coming up to something else. How am I going to do it differently?
Right.
Because I looked into the past.
You learned something from the past.
Yeah, and like it took me, because I'm a writer, so I wrote it down. And just sitting down and getting it out there and recognizing where the demons of my past, so to speak, were, like, is so helpful to me. Because now I'm doing better at work. I'm better in my relationships and whatnot. And that's the principle that I think Journey is about. It's like analyzing where you've been, what you're doing, and where you're going.
Yeah. It's also about learning from your story and about yourself. you know, we learn more from the tough times in our story than we do from the good times. When we're, when we're on the mountaintop and everything is going great and hunky-dory and the sun is shining, we aren't growing as much as when we're down in the valley and, we're slugging through the mud and it's tough. That's when we find out, oh, I'm stronger than I thought I was, or, oh, I can do this and I didn't know I could. Mm-hmm. And you can learn more about why you're running into, battles. Like, do you have any idea why it was so hard to color that? What were you worried about inside? Doing it perfectly or?
Doing it perfectly. This is something that, I do a lot of dreaming and a lot of envisioning in my life. And I think what has been going on the past couple of months is I've gotten things that I've prayed for, and I'm not getting the same feeling that I got when I was imagining it. And it's like, nothing in life is going to be perfect. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Right.
That's what I've personally taken from that.
Well, and I think when we're dreaming something, we get a dopamine rush.
Absolutely.
Our brain gives us a little boost of, this feels good. And we love the dreaming, and the dreaming is exciting. Life doesn't always hit our dreams. And what do we do with that? And so going through this, and once you learn once you've identified parts of your story, then looking at, okay, what are the strengths I identify in my story? What are some of the weaknesses I've identified in my story? Because the weaknesses sometimes paralyze us. And then going from there to, just am I working in the way that I was wired up to work? I was, what are my gifts and my talents, my skills?
I was just reading a book about that. But that's another thing that's talked about in the Journey Workbook is strengths and weaknesses. And I was actually just reading a book about that, how God gave us certain gifts and whatnot. And if we walk outside of those gifts and things are really difficult, and we go to church every Sunday and pray, hopefully this, gets better, but we're not walking in our identity, it's not going to get better. God made you for a certain purpose and for a certain plan. And so I think this is really important for people to know, is where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, and where is God calling you and your identity.
I do think it's important to help people realize that one of the aspects of Journey is to help them identify how their story fits in with his story.
Yeah.
That's the only point I want to make. Other than that.
Okay, great. Okay. And his meaning God.
Yeah.
Anyways. Me when I'm funny. See, this is my awkward coming out. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to keep that in the video. Just so everyone knows how awkward I am. Anyways, okay. Moving on.
Okay to be awkward. That's how we grow. We don't like to feel awkward, but can I give you an awkward moment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
So I worked as a nurse, and then I went back to school and got my master's in counseling. Mm-hmm. And the first time I was in my internship, and I had to tell somebody that I was going to be her counselor. Uh-huh. And I almost couldn't get the words out. I introduced myself, and I said, yeah, I'm Terry, and I'm going to be your... Because that was a very awkward moment that first time.
Why do you think that was?
Because I didn't see myself as a counselor yet. Even though I'd gotten through school.
That was not your identity.
That was not my identity.
That's so funny because I think also it takes a while to step into an identity. Yeah,
it does.
Awkward.
And I think it is. It's awkward. We don't want to try something new because we're afraid we're going to look stupid.
So then maybe that's what's happening right now on the podcast. This makes me feel weird.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate our conversation because I think it really just showed the audience where this came from, what was the story behind Journey, what are we doing here, which I think that they will appreciate very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story.